Cities evolve over centuries. Technology evolves in years. This fundamental mismatch is creating unprecedented tension as AI reshapes the workforce. Autonomous vehicles reimagine mobility, and robotics automate everything from construction to delivery. These aren't isolated disruptions. They're converging forces that will remake the urban landscape entirely. This session explores the collision between technological acceleration and urban inertia as cities face an unprecedented challenge, evolving at the speed of silicon rather than concrete. This is Cities at the Speed of Change. Please welcome John Moavanzada, Jennifer Strong, Brian Coop, James Scott, and Gregory Uwerp.
Hey everybody, thank you so much for hanging around till the very end of the day. I recognize and appreciate that we are standing between you and a cocktail, so thank you for coming and for hanging with us for this last one. I'm Jennifer Strong. I'm a journalist. I've been covering AI since about 2016. And you know, the thing that we talked about this, the thing that sort of sums this panel up, maybe for me a little bit, was arriving back onto MIT campus. I was a director of the Tech Review for 4 years. That construction, it was here when I left years ago. I'm not even sure we've moved a few feet with some of it in the couple of years since I've been here. But anyway, why don't we start with some more introductions and just pass this on down the line.
Hello, my name is Brian Coop. I'm with BXP, formerly known as Boston Properties.
Hello, everyone. I'm John Moavanzada. I'm Executive Director of the MIT Mobility Initiative. We're a program based here that focuses on delivering safe, clean, and inclusive transportation systems.
Good afternoon, everybody. I don't think you've ever been held up by an Irishman to get to the bar before, but so apologies about that. My name is James Scott. I am the Director of the Real Estate Transformation Lab at the MIT Center for Real Estate.
Hi everyone, I'm Gregory. I'm the founder of NOAA. We are the largest built world VC firm in Europe, and we invest in the positive transformation of the physical world.
All right, so why don't we start with a little bit of level setting? I think we all know tech moves fast. It's intuitive that cities move slow, but to fix a problem, you have to name it first. What are some of the big things standing in our way here? What are some of the big problems?
The things that, it's year end, so we're thinking about strategy for next year. And as I went through it for preparation, it's the same as it's been for the last 5. And the biggest one by far to me is the power grid. And we are clearly at capacity, and we know what the projections are for the future. We probably don't have good estimates on the needs of AI yet. There's some good estimates, but it's big, right? And then you combine that with sustainability policies, et cetera. It's a huge issue, and the existing infrastructure needs tons of capital, and the existing policy and regulation of just about every community in America is not going to match the need of how fast the substations, et cetera, are going to be able to be built. So number one for me is the grid. No power, no economy.
So in mobility, I am a technologist. I'm an engineer. I love technology. And we can talk about all the exciting things that are happening with autonomous mobility, with electrification, with electric vertical takeoff and landing, all of this great stuff. But I actually think the biggest challenge is around people and getting people to align around a common vision, and people who come from very different institutions and organizations. So, to really ultimately deliver safe, clean, and inclusive mobility systems, you need people at energy companies, at automotive companies, at utilities, the people in this room delivering the built environment, and just a very complex array of stakeholders to align around, where are we going and how do we get there? So, technology is great, but it's one of many important levers, and the challenge is people.
It is a tool. It is how you use the tool. Okay.
As said this morning, exactly.
I'm going to just throw it out there. I'm going to go with consistency of vision. And the reason I'm going to go with that from a global level is because, it's very hard for this panel to talk. We've heard so many brilliant people today on so many incredible visions and success stories around the world. But the success stories that we talked about, they didn't come about today or yesterday. They're 25 to 50-year-old visions that have taken a multitude of generations to get there. And in cities like, well, we'll use Boston for an example. We're sitting here. You have a regulatory situation that changes every 4 years. You have a different economy every 4 years. You have real estate cycles. So to create a city of the future, with a legacy city, not a blank canvas like a California forever, where you're starting, with a flat plane, but to take a city like this here and to try and drive it into the future and use innovative change. It takes a number of people and a number of years to get there, and then ultimately those people all change within the circumstances of making that happen, and you have to start again. So it's a self-fulfilling failing prophecy, if that makes any sense in that way. And for the cities of the future that you see that are really striving to make a difference out there at this minute in time, they are being led by crazy visionaries that said, hold on. Do you know what they pulled? There's a number of people here from Dubai. They saw, His Highness Sheikh Mohammed pull up in an S-Class Mercedes on a dune of sand in the 1980s and said, I'm going to do this. And everyone said, you know what? No, you're not. And he went about and created it. But it kind of sometimes takes a little bit of madness to kind of drive that and and it also takes a couple of generations to make it happen as well.
I agree with everything that's said, although for my fellow panelists who's worried about regulations and policy making, you should come and see us in Europe. You'll see how that looks like. Generally, I will say I agree with electricity, but I will also say that there is a different problem depending where you are on the planet. I think if you look at Europe or most places in the US, we are victims of bad urban planning over the last centuries. And if you look at the Middle East, they are fortunate that they can build entire cities from scratch with no legacy. And I think the cities of tomorrow will have to look significantly different than the cities of today or even yesterday. It's not so much going to be about architecture, it's going to be about computational ability, is going to be about interoperability of mobility, energy, buildings, all those things that eventually allow us to have fully autonomous cities and buildings that can self-regulate, self-adapt to the environment, to the service of the people who live in it. And we are very far from it in most places. Speaking from Europe, we have to retrofit our buildings just to make them more efficient, and we're struggling even to do that. So imagine getting to the next level that I've just described. So there's a huge gap that we need to overcome, and I think regulations come in the way, legacy thinking gets in the way, and cultural herd mentality also gets in the way.
All right, so given the fundamental mismatch, right, between cities and their speed or lack of, and technology and that speed, what do you see from each of your perspectives as the kind of most important friction point right now? Is it policy, is it real estate, is it investment, something else entirely? Jump in.
Look, there's a number of different ways you could answer that question, but for one, that definitely it pops into, it's definitely top 5 in my book, and in a lot of ways, and it's the restraints that are put on real estate development through the capital structure. Specifically maybe here in the US and maybe in Europe as well, and I'll give an example of that in a second. But 10-year financing for a real estate development as a concept, or Like, I mean, Cooper, sorry to drag you into this, but like, I mean, you have a quarterly report, like, I mean, that you have to adhere to, and you have to try and hit goals every single time, like, I mean, and so to try and drive innovation and change where you're under that pressure, like, I mean, to hit those goals and those markers, like, I mean, it doesn't make it easy for you to be, you know, have an R&D department to go out there and be really risky and try something really cool and change something and drive, you know, a whole new segment of the city. You have financial and fiduciary responsibility, and that's really, really difficult. And you know, the best example I got of this was during the year. Like, I mean, for some of you, you know, that working with Goodwin on a particular project based out of Europe, and the element of the conversation was on sustainability, and we were looking to Europe to showcase, you know, you guys are doing it better. And we asked the people in Europe, you know, some of the leading people in Europe, and you know, one of the guys was saying how, you know, we're in Europe, we think about sustainability different. We want to change the world. It's not about the financial return. And then a wonderful spokesman for a German REIT stood in and goes, can I stop you there for a second? We had a 90-cent per share distribution to be given to our shareholders last week, and we offered them the chance to take 1 cent of that share, of that 90-cent dividend, to put to more sustainable efforts. And it was a resounding 100% vote of no, because they had a fiduciary responsibility to their shareholders, like to ensure that they had the most amount of return for their investment. And you realize when you have those shackles, like, I mean, as a real estate developer and as an investor, like, I mean, it's very, very difficult to drive innovative change, like, I mean, which is in something different.
Anybody else want to drive in?
Yeah, so the question was the challenges?
Yeah, the challenge, or just like, what's the friction point right now?
Well, the friction point, I'll put it in two categories. One is there's challenges, big problems that are coming. And I forget the author's name, but the loop of doom is the devaluation of buildings leading to the devaluation of taxes, leading to the, you know, less revenues for the city. Now they've got to cut the budget, blah, blah, blah. And when you look at like New York, the projections are, it starts going down 2% next year, the following year 3%, 4%, 5%, gets to 7% in like 30 or 31. That's $2 billion, $2.9 billion a year in less taxes. So there's the challenges there, and the friction's going to be, are our political leaders going to be able to deal with that? Are they going to be able to solve that? The other is for projecting into the future with the long-term vision. One of the things that's really interesting to me is that we're seeing in cities that have hired managers, we're seeing better performance for sure, and longer-term vision there than where there's a mayor who goes every 4 years and then it's a new vision, et cetera. So structurally, that's an issue, right? And we've got to start looking at what performs better. But it gets to, are these politicians going to have the guts and leadership to change the regulations that will allow the things they want? If you want decarbonization, you're going to have to improve the grid by 40% capacity in the next 10 years. Well, you're not going to be able to do that if you can't even site a substation in a neighborhood. On average, it takes 7 to 10. That's just one. So they're going to have to change the regulations. They're going to have to be strong leaders. And instead of trying to always sell, they're going to have to tell. And the cities that have the strong leadership, they're going to be able to do that, and they're going to have an advantage. And you get down to the advantage of new cities, just like startups can go right around older companies, the new cities are going to have an advantage. They got a blank slate.
I think there's also another level of issue is, I don't think at least in my lifetime, I don't think I've seen the future happening as fast as it is happening right now. And all the stakeholders are just completely lost. Like, you can't expect from a regulator or a policymaker who's still trying to figure out what AI is to have an opinion on how to shape the future of our cities. You can't expect most real estate leaders who are busy dealing with all the issues they've been having in the last few years, now suddenly having to adopt AI in their own business, but also think about the consequences of AI. One day they'll hear that we'll have 95% unemployment because everyone's going to be replaced by AI. So should they be investing in office? Should they move somewhere else? Like, there is just too much happening all at the same time, and I think it actually creates inertia.
Yeah, maybe I can just pick up on that word, inertia, because for me that is a big friction point, particularly the inertia of human behavior, right? So in my field, in transportation, just, think about it for a moment. Why do we accept that it's okay that 1.19 million people are killed every year on the world's roads, and effectively 0 to, in a bad year, a couple hundred are killed in the skies, right? And it's because we've come to form an expectation around these different transportation systems. And I know many of us in this room are personally affected by people who have been involved, hurt, or killed in an automobile accident. Here in the United States, it's over 40,000 people. The interesting question is, why do we accept that level of fatality in one mode of transportation but not in the other? And it does come down to this issue of kind of, human inertia and why we make the choices that we do in transportation on a daily basis. And so that's a big part of our research, is trying to understand that. The power of the status quo is remarkable. The power of habits is truly remarkable in the day-to-day decisions that we make in transport. Perhaps it's the same in real estate as well.
Just some facts that back up what you're saying about human behavior. The one that stuns me the most right now is the return to subway systems. So in Mass, at the T-stop here at Kendall Square, it's still at 55% of what pre-COVID was. That's just mind-boggling to me, right? It hasn't gone back to 80%, 90%. Other stations have, but most of them are still well below. And in the state, we just found out that there's something like 500,000 new cars registered over the last 3 years, and we have 0 population growth. So what's taken place? This human behavior thing, it stuns me that it's going in this direction, especially in a state that is so focused on sustainability. So our habits and behavior are not matching maybe the belief systems. Another good example is in power. So we did a survey at our Boston Properties University of everybody, and it was rate for you as a consumer of electricity in your home, reliability, cost, sustainability. In Nebraska, it was reliability, cost, sustainability. Everybody said to me, oh, it's going to be different in Massachusetts, Coop. It was exactly like Nebraska.
Oh, sorry, you're reaching for the mic? I thought you were about to say something.
Yeah, we're sharing.
Oh. Thank you. I want to go to your questions earlier than others have done also, just by the way, because you're all sitting here. You must be thinking something, right? There's something that you actually want them to talk about or that you're interested in. So I would say begin to get those thoughts together, maybe make a motion if there's somebody around with a mic, and we'll jump in and out. If you had a wand, and tomorrow you can make one change that you think would dramatically shift the conversation, what would it be? Is it a policy? It would help effectively bridge the gap that you're trying to bridge. Is it a policy change, like something else? The look on his face is kind of priceless. I don't know if anybody else is noticing James right there, but
remove politicians from the equation completely.
That would require a
and
wand.
on a serious note, the issue is, if we're talking about the cities of the future, they're going to take decades to be formed and rebuilt and rethought. You can't have politicians who are operating on a 3, 4, 5-year mandate who have to do the stuff to get reelected, to take the long-term decision. It just simply does not work. However often we try, it's impossible. And I think given the speed at which things are changing, you need to have leadership that is able, not only willing, but able to be long-term thinkers.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the only people who can do that today are China. Certainly not us in Europe or in the US. And that's a big problem.
China, also the Middle East. There's a few places that are able to. Also, to your point a few moments ago, this is affecting all the sectors. Like, these problems are not totally unique or separate right here, right? The speed of change and the people who are trying to implement the change not being able to define artificial intelligence, or data laws that impact education that were written when children's data were stored in in file cabinets, right? Like you have 70-year-old laws trying to interact with today's speed of tech, and it's very, very challenging.
Can you imagine that 2.5, 3 years ago, nobody even mentioned the word AI? Maybe 1% of people, and you've been doing this since 2016.
No, I can imagine it very well.
But now that's
what's going to happen to your career, Jen? Nobody cares about that. It's really boring. No one's going to read that.
That's literally everything we talk about, what every corporate, when they report, talk about, what every CEO has to talk about. We talk about nothing else than something that was in no one's vocabulary 2 years ago.
Sure.
That's the speed at which things change. It's mind-blowing.
Yeah, I completely agree. And, it used to be in the old days that sort of, the big fish eats the small fish. Now it's very much the fast fish eats the slow fish. And China is the fast fish. And we, I think, in the United States are sometimes a little bit disconnected with the rest of the universe in our sort of political news cycle and so forth. We don't realize that, the Chinese automobiles, for example, are really quite superior now, particularly electric vehicles, because we don't have them on our streets, here and in Canada. But all we have to do is travel down to Mexico or South America or many, many countries in Europe and the Middle East and the whole rest of the planet. And we can see why that is happening. So it's not just about the vision of long-term government policy, as you pointed out. And if you were to ask the question, how did China become a leader in electric vehicles? Government is a very important component of answering that question. But it's not just about government. It's very much about a culture of innovation and speed. And when you couple speed with scale, you have a really, really formidable economic competitor.
There's some interesting stats. China has more industrial robots than the entirety of the world combined. Mm-hmm. I think within the next 2 years, correct me if I'm wrong, but they'll have enough solar power generation to power the entirety of the US electricity demand on a relative basis. Europe, nowhere in the conversation. US stuck in the political ups and downs. But I think the approach China has to supporting innovation is actually quite particular. And it's very in dark contrast with Europe or the US. So US is free market, may the best win, you raise money from private venture capital firm and let the best win. Europe is government funds everyone, even the ones they shouldn't be funding, who stay idle and kind of half alive for too long, so there's no recycling of talent. China decides on a theme, on a vertical, picks 30 companies, give them the same amount of money, and then it's Hunger Game, may the best win. That creates speed, that creates organizational efficiency, and that's why they're ahead of everyone else on pretty much every topic. And it's because they have this model, because they have the long-term vision, and it's scary because I'm from Europe. I don't even know where we are on any of those conversations.
Well, I feel like I need to be I also don't want this to be the Debbie Downer panel. Welcome, everybody. This is the conversation where everybody has to drink afterwards. No, I would like us to do a couple of things. One, I will say, I'm spending more time looking at a lot of tech in Europe and a lot of tech policy in Europe, and I'm actually kind of bullish suddenly on Europe. I'm seeing things like put a data center where the heat actually makes Helsinki warm, or like other just innovative thinking when you have real, to your point, challenges and struggles, and you face some struggles there and you don't get the same access to funding, et cetera, that sometimes you really want it and you really kind of fight for it a little bit, right? Can we dig into vision here? Like we're hitting all the negative points. What are the possibilities, like the other side of this coin? Let's talk more about the cities that are doing things well and what those things are. What could we do here if we were to get our act together?
So I'm going to answer two questions. The first one, what do I wish for? It would, if I had wanted, it'd be Robert Greene, who I really like as an author. He's got this focus right now, which is he believes that everybody needs radical realism. And I wish that our not only our political leaders locally, but nationally had radical realism at the local level for here's the challenges, it's coming, we got to work on it. On a national level, you get into China, I don't think we're being realistic, especially local. You know, well, Kendall Square will always be Kendall Square, and there's something unique about it. Well, in China, they have a plan for 200 cities to have a power grid that is 3 times larger than any city we have. That's 200. Well, you're not going to be able to do the things that we're talking about in your field unless there's power. And at the same time, we're kind of dreaming and looking at our navels about we are for sustainability as a company. I'm passionate about it, but we're using some of the wrong measurements and we're comparing ourselves to ghosts. So they're firing up with solar panels, right? That's wonderful. They're also firing up 200 coal burning generators this year. So we got to be realistic about what we're doing versus the rest of the world. Radical realism be what we need. But here's something ambitious. What if we said that Massachusetts was just going to get the best possible power grid for the U.S. and it's going to look like this, and here's what it's going to cost, and we're going to get after it, because then all the things we want to do for our people, whether it's education or jobs, et cetera, we can do it.
I'm going to do the same as Brian, and I'm going to answer 2 questions. If I was to probably add a little bit to what you were removing politicians, I'm not sure that's the right, necessarily realistic, especially in this part of the world. And so what I would say is having the right people in the right positions and having the expertise in the right positions, because that's what's really missing. And if there's ever a better example of that here in the Western world, it's Sidewalk Labs in Toronto. And everybody can give me, you know what I mean, there's 15 different versions out there of why that all went pear-shaped. But the idea wasn't wrong. Get really smart, brilliant people into a room, use data and use analysis to better understand how can we deliver the best products to our city and to create the best communities. But what they forgot was they needed real estate developers to actually figure it out. And I'm not saying that disparagingly, but they missed, that element of that human connection to be able to orchestrate those narratives with the city and connect all of that analysis and actually create something together, because that's what a real estate developer does, is that they bring everybody on the same journey and make them kind of believe in it. And it's not just trying to prove a point, look, I have the data here to make it happen. And what they're doing in China is absolutely mind-blowing. It is, but they are dealing with the blank canvas. They're not dealing with legacy situations. And there's also tastes, culture, politics, and there's a million other things that are getting in the way of how to drive American cities. But for me, what I would love to see, across the board, if it was kind of as a level of inspiration, is seeing the top real estate teams. And I know that they have shackles, but maybe develop out a small level of R&D, whereby they are given the opportunity to work with cities and be allowed to fail. And I know that's a horrible word in the world of real estate, but be given the opportunity to, I'm going to be cheesy and say, fail forward. All right, and say, you know what, we're allowed to do this, we're allowed to get it wrong, but it's for the benefit of everybody within this community to see how this works. Provide the incentives, maybe at a financial level, and see where they can go for that, to give people a little bit more of a chance to drive innovation and change some of the hard aspects of what cities are having to deal with in this part of the world.
Maybe to concur with that, amongst our LPs, we have some of the largest real estate corporations on the planet, and we help them innovate. And I think for a long time it was very difficult because they didn't have either the right people in charge of innovation. They'll find someone in the accounting department and put them in charge of innovation. But they also were not allowed to do anything wrong. And if they did try to do something and it failed, the rest of the naysayers of the organization will say, well, we told you so, tech doesn't work, or tech is a problem. So I think the change of the type of talent that real estate organizations are going to bring to drive innovation, and them having the freedom to operate more autonomously, I think is going to be very important. But I also want to come back on your point on sustainability, because it's a big topic for us. And one of the things that I think has hampered the sustainability discussion is the fact that we've tried to sell sustainability in the name of sustainability, in the name of doing the right thing, which in some places is polarizing or is just not what people care about. And I think we have such amazing technology today that allows you to do things better operationally, save money, all those things, and then, by the way, reduce your carbon emission. And that's how they should be sold. They should be sold in the name of financial or operational efficiency. Why am I so loud suddenly? And that's why China is not doing solar because they care about the environment. They're doing solar because it's cheap. Texas is not adopting solar faster than Germany because they care so much about the environment. I hope there's no Texan here, but it's because it's the cheap. It's the cheapest source of energy.
They're pure capitalist.
And I think controversial. I know you seem to. I'm not such a European doomer, but still, I'm a realist. I think Europe was so ahead on talking about climate. I think they're falling behind. Germany is a great example of that because they're not linking the practicality of it, and they're just trying to sell everything in the name of altruism, which I don't think is how climate gets anywhere.
Right, the problem is not well defined, which is something we see over and over again, right? A study from this very campus not that long ago about 95% of AI, failing, right? These enterprise applications, and it brings it back to something that my colleagues, other journalists, have been saying for a few years now, looking at this space. Like two things: one, I've never seen, you don't cut your way to greatness. So where are the moonshots? Why is all the focus only on like finding a couple of points of efficiency, but not necessarily chasing the thing that you finally have the bandwidth to do? And then the other, it's like, okay, but what problem does this solve? And so getting very clear on actually what it is you're trying to achieve and what it would mean to achieve it and how, and having like a business plan in place. Right.
Real quick, it just came to mind that when we were talking about who has a fresh slate, if Dominic is still here, Endicott, who wrote Knowledge Town, and then our speakers from Burlington, Vermont, these types of communities have a fresh slate, so maybe they're the hope for America. They're smaller, they can move quicker, possibly, and have a plan, long-term plan. Because talking to the guys from Vermont last night, I was just blown away by the vision. Now that's a long-term plan.
Yeah, and I certainly didn't mean to be the Debbie Downer on the panel. I have actually, I'm quite long-term optimistic on the power of not just the technology, but the technology coupled with people to affect real substantive change. So the transportation world, of course, is integrated with the built environment. Travis mentioned it earlier. What will drive the transformation in mobility will fundamentally be cost. Right, so we're in a world right now where we have a very expensive model of personal mobility that relies on the personally owned automobile, and these things are only getting pricier, right? So if we can move toward not just the autonomous system, and we can talk about how the technology is really advancing and what Waymo is doing, and it's truly remarkable. It is truly remarkable, and by the way, it's safer, and I will say that. I mean, the data indicate that it's safer, and as we get more and more data, I think it's going to corroborate that. As the cost comes down, right, on the autonomous technology, and then you have a sort of business model flip in cities where we transition away from the personally owned automobile and we transition to fleets of either driven or autonomous vehicles. It becomes cheaper for everybody to get around. Now, does it solve congestion? No, it doesn't, because of something called induced demand. And when you lower the price on something, we consume more of it, right? So, but that's a good thing, right? Getting people around a city is a good thing. If you've been in Sao Paulo, it's tough, right? I mean, if you've been in a heavily congested city.
Just a question for you. Do you think that lower cost of mobility or ease of mobility drives people further away from the city centers as well?
So this is such a fascinating question. To what degree does this autonomous influence sprawl? My view is that it's going to encourage concentration, because the starting point to look at any urban transportation system is the morphology of the city. Take two cities, Atlanta and Barcelona. They're about the same population, but if you look at the built-up environment of Atlanta, it sprawls over a much larger area than the built-up environment of Barcelona. same population, much more density in Barcelona. You're already starting with a different challenge. You're starting with a completely different set of characteristics that you need to solve for to enable transportation in Barcelona. So my personal view is that we will see that cities are far from dead, that we will see models of mobility where you do have more. It gives an advantage to high density cities.
Yeah, I have to agree with that. And there's often been conversations within our lab with how autonomous vehicles change the makeup of a city, and does it actually remove this concept that we've all loved and known our whole lives of real estate, which is location, location, location. But what we're seeing from demographics and COVID was a really great insight into this, but people strive and demand experience and connection, and they need that and they want that. And it's such an important element of what it is. And the retail segment, it's taken itself 15 odd years to figure out what experience is. I have no doubts office is going to utilize some of the elements of what experiential retail is over the last 15 years and try to drive that with what people want within the office. But people really want to be connected in a way, and going further out doesn't give them that in any sense.
All right, I'm looking around the room. You all are still here. It could be because the bar's not open, but there might be, say, a question that you want to ask. If so, just stand up, please. Oh, great.
I think you guys were mentioning about China. So one of the things they do is the nationalized companies, they want to do things cheaper, so they reverse engineer the boring machines, and then they can tunnel a lot cheaper. And so the same principle should be applied to prop tech. So this way you can do the same thing, get subways in for less money. So I'm curious what your thoughts on that is.
I'll jump in on the first one. I follow the prop tech industry pretty closely, and have done for a number of years. If I'm going to be very honest, and people will give out to me, I'm sure, after this, but what prop tech needs right now is a liquidity event. It needs a star up there, because there's been $20-30 million invested, in different years, right up to maybe last year, where we saw a significant comeback. AI then drove another kind of evolution of a wave of investment. But that industry needs a unicorn to hit an IPO, or to have a significant buyout for a lot of the other large-scale investors that are there to see, yes, this is real. This is something that of significance. It's not just an asset class that's has scalability, but only to a certain point. And I think if we saw one of the HQO, see going to a higher level, on evaluation, you're going to have something like, a situation where prop tech will find a significant more investment from the leading investors.
I also think we need to stop calling it prop tech, because people actually don't. It's very limiting in its terminology, and it's so much more. We used to call it prop tech when I first launched the firm, but we actually don't even talk about the built environment anymore. We just talk about the physical world, because there's so many things that are connected to the real estate, the infrastructure. We like to say that the built world is the operating system of humanity, because it's literally everything that we use on a daily basis, from the infrastructure, the energy, the buildings. For me, that is prop tech. And the problem with prop tech is people think it's a niche because they don't understand what it is. And that's the biggest hurdle to more capital coming into it, besides more liquidity. I think people are not educated enough on on the diversity and the breadth of the tech stack that relates to the physical world.
And does everybody in here, just raise your hands, everyone knows what prop tech is? Would somebody like to maybe keep defining that slightly more? Because either nobody wants to raise their hands, or nobody knows. I'm not sure which. But
we can have a full row. Steve and I do a full class on creating a definition of prop tech. And like, I mean, even the two of us don't agree on it. Well, like, I mean, at any time, but you know, we go all out. I mean, at a certain level, and we describe prop tech as anything that digitizes the built environment, and that can cause a number of you know, heated debates.
Just going back to that first thing about making sure everybody's on the same page.
Can I just raise
please.
a comment about, you know, we're here and we're talking primarily about real estate, but the way I think to consider the universe is to think about kind of a system of systems, right? So you mentioned data centers, right? And we know that we're going to need a lot of electricity to power all of this AI. So that's part of our electricity grid. That's an important system. I talk about transportation. You talk about the built environment. If we have visions for how to better integrate those systems and try to, as much as we can, stay out of our own silos and interact with others, I think that's only a positive thing. So let me give you a specific example. 10 years ago, I'm in Gothenburg meeting with the CEO of Volvo, not Volvo car, Volvo truck. And he says, hey, John, I'm developing this electric bus. I said, wow, that's great. That's great for the planet, great for CO2. And he goes, but look at this picture. And he shows this electric Volvo bus driving into the library at Chalmers University. So all of a sudden, you think about what's your mental framing of what is a bus, right? I mean, to me, a bus is like you're stuck out in the rain, not knowing when this thing is going to come. Everybody hates buses. But this enables, when you integrate this electric bus, which is non-polluting emitting and relatively quiet, with the built environment, you can have, you know, these types of vehicles driving through the mezzanine of large properties and so forth. But to get there takes a lot of coordination, a lot of vision, but it's doable. It's achievable. And, you know, for me, that's like the really big opportunity that we all have to unlock and sort of get out of our silos. That's why I'm happy to be here, because I'm a transportation guy with a bunch of real estate people. We need, I think, you know, more of that interaction among our different silos.
I'm liking this progression to capturing the imagination away from all the other things that we're not good at. Anybody else?
And maybe just a last comment on that before I take the question. I mean, for us as a Built World Fund, we've invested in satellites that do infrared thermal imaging for thermal efficiency of buildings. We're doing drone infrastructure for weather modification. We're doing autonomous buildings. We're doing grid efficiency. If you ask anyone if that would go into a prop tech mandate, they will say, hell no, but we do it. And I think that's also a testament to the breadth of the industry.
Just one quick comment. I have to share this. You know, we're talking about with mobility, getting out of each other's way. Was anybody sitting in traffic on Monday here in Boston when the rains were coming down for an hour and maybe moving 50 feet, and hearing the horns and the aggression and feeling your own body change in that environment? But then, did you anyone see the video this week of the port and all of the autonomous vehicles working together in synchronization? And the video clip is incredible because it showcases, you kind of think it's China in operation, and then you realize it's Long Beach. And you kind of go, okay, hold on, this is a significant milestone where you're seeing, places like Long Beach, utilize over 100 autonomous vehicles to run their logistics hub, and it works and is working seamlessly. And you kind of go, okay, there's a vision for the future, how cities can run and operate. And you think to yourself, okay, I can manage Boston for another few years if that's where we're going to go, as opposed to what I had to deal with on Monday.
Question over here. Hey there. So you mentioned that study about 95% of AI projects fail. I kind of think of it the other way and say 5% of projects are succeeding. And as someone who uses AI every day in programming, I definitely see more than a 20x improvement in my speed. So I guess the question to the panel is, in terms of AI's impact right now, that I see is just how fast you can make decisions, and better systems and better tooling. How do you see speed as a lever for the kind of things that you're discussing or the kind of challenges that we're facing when we're talking about radically improving or radically increasing how fast we can make decisions?
Good question.
Maybe on that, I think we also have to think about the context. The bar is so low in real estate to create any form of improvement from folks who are using paper and maybe on a good case basis Excel, that I would say 99% of AI will help. And so we have to always remember the context of the industry that it's trying to disrupt.
I'll add to that a little bit. And you know, I love the way you say Excel. Like, I mean, Excel's it's a 40-year-old software that this entire industry is based off. And you know, it wasn't that long ago. Like, I mean, February of last year, we were told, you know, everyone keeps talking about, oh, AI and finance, it can't run pro forma. It's not there yet. And then suddenly March comes along, and you know, the new version of Claude comes out, and yeah, you can run a pretty decent pro forma. Like, I mean, certainly back of the envelope, it's not as good as your best analyst anyway, in any way, but you know, you could certainly set up your AI to run a diagnostic or a due diligence over 400 to 500 marketing prospectus, and you do it in maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours if you had it run well. And that's a significant saving. Like, I mean, from a manpower level, and as well as, you know, trying to, you know, to build it out. And there's a number of different iterations of where this goes. And you know, it's not just in real estate, but when are we going to see a one-person band utilizing AI to hit a company level of a unicorn status? And that'll be an incredible marker, because that will filter down into a number of different industries pretty quickly, because they'll be running their marketing from an AI, they'll be, software, they'll be running their financial analysis, they'll be running their gamification and strategy on it as well. And you know, seeing something like that will be a really, you know, interesting marker in time, I think, for how a lot of businesses are using this.
Anybody else?
Just to dovetail on the AI side, I mean, Elon Musk just recently talked about it's not the chips, it's not the transformers, it's the energy that's going to be is going to be holding everything back. And how do you feel like you're getting pulled into the energy infrastructure side as it relates to both real estate generally? And if you could, you know, kind of wave a magic wand, like what would you do or have people in this audience do to help the cause, whether around technology, AI, and just making the systems be able to operate more effectively?
So we don't have to do it from the parking lot like he's doing right now? Yeah.
Just more intelligence in our buildings, in our infrastructure, and our utilities. You know, buildings don't have to become greener, they have to become smarter. The grid has to become smarter. We don't have to spend $1 in infrastructure to release 10, 20, 25% of grid capacity if we just made the grid smart. And we have the technology to do it. That's stuff we've been investing in. Intelligence into the physical world that has been built without any of it for decades is going to be the lowest hanging fruit for us to make a significant move forward without having to spend anything in broader, large infrastructure project. Making buildings autonomous, it's much harder to make an autonomous building than an autonomous car, because there's so many more things that are plugged into it. But it's possible, and you reduce consumption by 30, 40, 50%. These are simple things that are going to completely transform the industry. They're there already. We don't have to wait. And to your point earlier about energy, I think I always like to say AI is more physical than it is digital, because without the energy, the electricity, all those infrastructure play, there is no more AI progress forward. We're going to be capped very soon. In addition to have negative public opinion, I already start reading articles about people complaining about energy costs going up because we're all creating Sora videos on social media. And I think, you know, people are going to be worried about their jobs. They're going to be worried about electricity costs because of AI. So I think it's really important that if we want progress, and AI is definitely going to be an amazing vector for progress, that we enable those things to not have an adverse impact on the population. Otherwise, I think it's going to create some form of backlash eventually.
I can't not answer on this one, but I was with a group of heavyweight strategic investors not so long ago, and we were talking about this particular point, and they, you know, I naively threw out the comment, and I put my hands in the air, very naively said, you know, what about nuclear? And, you know, does that make sense? And they said, yeah, it'd be great. Like, I mean, but do you understand, I mean, what the actual length of time is? If we start today, I mean, of building a nuclear power plant, how long it comes online? And I thought maybe 3 years. It said somewhere between 8 to 10. So that's how long it would take to kind of to get to there. So this is what you're asking is a huge question, and you know, everybody's kicking the can down the road on this. Like, I mean, in a major way, and even this city is dealing with significant power issues as it goes right now. With even just, I'll turn to Coop on this. Is there a development that you can do right now where you don't have to mitigate some element of power for the city in order to get that development on to move it forward, be it a substation or something else to keep it going? Because that's what required even here in this city.
Yeah, so the best example of a good thing and in partnership was we did a deal with the city of Cambridge where they needed a new substation, but significant to fuel everything that's here, the Broad Institute, et cetera, MIT. And so we partnered up with them and we took a parking lot down and then we dug a hole 10 stories down and the substation's going in there. And then we're putting a park above it. And then for that, in exchange for that, we received extra building square footage rights. And that's where AstraZeneca's going now. So that's a good example of an outcome. And it's underground too. There's a lot of benefits.
Very cool. I didn't know about that. Anybody else want to dive in? Also, I should tell the organizers the clock fell down. So if you want me to shut up, like wave your arms or something, because I don't know. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Maybe on a lighter note, I've only heard the D word once today that I can reflect on, which is drones. Anybody care to comment on drones and cargo delivery and the impact on real estate or infrastructure?
Yeah, I mean, I can take a stab at that. There's the D word and the E word, right? So the E word is electric vertical takeoff and landing, which is more geared toward the passenger side. The D word is more toward cargo. I believe there are big opportunities. There's no doubt. However, the likelihood that our cities are characterized by swarms of delivery drones flying above the skies, I personally see as unlikely because I don't think that citizens are likely to accept that. You do have a pretty strong visual effect, you have noise impacts and so forth. So, I mean, there is no doubt that there are situations where drone delivery, somebody is in a medical emergency, they need blood. That was actually, Rwanda was one of the first sort of great use cases of drone delivery. There's no doubt that there are powerful use cases, but I personally would sense it's kind of a niche market. There was a lot of excitement 10 years ago about the Hyperloop, remember that? And we were all going to be going in our vacuum tubes, and then they kind of pivoted from passenger to freight. And I once met a railroad executive at BNSF, and he told me I've never met a piece of freight that felt like it had to move at 700 miles per hour. So I mean, there is the vast majority of what's flowing in our logistics system doesn't necessarily lend itself well to drone delivery.
Anybody else want to dive in? So we have 5 minutes. If anybody else has a question, otherwise I will ask one of my own. Going once, going twice, anybody else? Okay, so in our last couple of minutes here, we've talked about a lot of things. There are a lot more things we could talk about. What's one takeaway you want to leave the room with, or one bit of advice perhaps?
Okay. I would just say big picture, and we started with it this morning in this concept of quantum cities that was laid out by Chase and his colleagues, which is, technology is a means to an end, and we should really focus on what people want. And at least in the transportation system, I mean, I've been in transportation my whole career. I could actually make an argument that mobility doesn't matter. Who cares? Who cares about transportation? What we care about is access, right? Access to healthcare, access to education, access to good jobs. That's what we care about. And the way that we achieve access is really through 3 primary channels. The first is mobility, is transportation. But the second is proximity, right? What you guys are all experts in. That's why 10,000 years ago we decided we're going to live in cities because it has benefits. Right? The proximity provides these benefits. The third one, of course, is connectivity, and we've all become experts in that, digital world, certainly since the pandemic. So, I mean, my takeaway would be to sort of focus on what it is that's really, really important to people first, and then work backwards from that.
Awesome.
I mean, despite being the doomer on the panel, I'm actually super excited. We think the city of the future is not just going to be smart and tech-enabled, it's going to be sentient, and I think it's going to be about letting this intelligence shape the humanity that we want to see, and really putting it to good use to service our people and increase their quality of life, their well-being, their access to all those things that are harder to get today. So I think there's two steps of this evolution, which is A, make our cities smarter, more intelligent, data-driven, tech-enabled, autonomous, but then is letting this intelligence steer those cities in the right direction for the benefit of our society and our population. So I'm excited and look forward to see what happens next.
This doesn't absolutely answer your question, but the thing I'm really excited about is something that Neil, a previous speaker, was talking about with his digital rights management. And the excitement for us is that to take AR and apply it to the physical world of real estate, that's pretty freaking cool. And I think there'd be a big opportunity to create revenue streams that we never dreamed of, and we desperately need now in real estate. But it's going to take place in cities for the most part. And that could be really cool, and it could be an advantage for a city who gets ahead on this. It could be an advantage for certain real estate. So that could be a differentiator that's got us pretty fired up.
Does anyone here come across the Gartner hype cycle? Right? It has its merits in lots of ways, and a lot of the tech we've talked about, over the course of this afternoon or this morning even, we've hit that element of the peak of inflated expectations where we thought this was going to change everything, and we're still talking about autonomous vehicles even 10 years later. We're talking about blockchain 10 years later, but we haven't really found that application. The concept of the quantum city that we've really spent the entire day kind of delving this out, I think it's so exciting where we are at this moment in time. I think we're on the cusp of a significant change with how we utilize cities, and COVID has been a facilitator of that in lots of ways, with a work from home, which has facilitated a greater adoption of technology and mobile tech, that we've got autonomous vehicles on the cusp of making a significant change. We have AI making a significant change to the tasks within our jobs, how it's going to affect jobs. So for me, the really exciting part is we're on the cusp of something new. I think our cities are going to look very, very different 5-10 years from now, and it's going to be a challenge. It's going to be a challenge for the policymakers, for the developers, but it's also going to be a significant opportunity for everybody that looks at this as an opportunity and decides, we're going to look at connecting the human, the digital, and the physical all together to create something better for the people that live in these cities.
Yeah, I could not agree with you more. And this is, for me, I spent the last 4 or 5 years gathering these oral histories from founders and others who are bearing witness to these moments of change, in part because I think 5-10 years from now we're going to wake up and go, when did that happen? Or also, in the same way that we had Travis here talking about Uber, and for most of us in the room, like, we couldn't imagine the application until it was just the thing. In the same way, our phones, when we were first talking about how we'd use them, or 2 years ago, how we would use generative AI in our daily lives, like, we don't really know until we're already doing it. And so documenting this moment right now in our kind of the fog, I think is incredibly important. Yeah. Thank you all very much for staying with us.